Hello, and welcome back to the story. Today we will be making a recap on a 2013 movie titled Side Effects. The story begins with bloodstains and footprints all over the floor and toy boat and Gift sitting on a chair. We are then taken back 3 months earlier in a prison. A woman named Emily is getting ready to visit her husband in prison. Her husband, Martin, is sentenced to 4 years in prison because of insider trading or manipulating the stock market. One day, Emily talks with her boss and tells her that she won't be coming to work the next day because her husband is about to be released. The next day, Emily and Martin's mother drive to the prison and wait for him. Martin finally goes out and Emily runs to hug him. That evening, they make love, but Emily seems to be unhappy and not feeling it. Martin talks about a hedge fund manager named Marshall who he met in prison. He says that he might be able to help him get a job in Dubai after he is released. He promises that they will be getting their life back the way it used to be, and Emily replies okay without enthusiasm. Emily later goes to the car parking lot still looking distracted and drops her things in her bag. The parking attendant helps her. She fastens her seatbelt and starts to drive away. She floors the pedal and rams her car straight into the wall. At the hospital, a psychiatrist named Dr. Banks visits Emily and interviews her about what happened. He asks her if she intentionally tried to hurt herself and then asks her if she still intends to hurt herself again, to which Emily has no reply. When he asks her to stay in the hospital longer, Emily refuses, saying she must go to work and has to be with her husband. Dr. Banks is convinced that Emily tried to end her life, but she assures him it won't happen again. The doctor agrees to release Emily, but on the condition that she visits his office and starts taking antidepressant medicine. Emily is back at work. She seems not feeling well and later runs to the bathroom to throw up. Her boss gets inside and checks her medicine, saying that she took it before, and it made her feel sick too. Emily goes out of the bathroom looking sick. One day, Emily visits Dr. Banks. She tells her how she met her husband. Dr. Banks found out Emily has prior case of depression and goes to a different psychiatrist before. Dr. Banks then talks to her previous psychiatrist named Dr. Victoria. Dr. Victoria narrates how Emily ended up in depression previously when their house and her husband were taken away from her. Dr. Victoria says Emily tried different medications, but she struggled with all of them, so she suggests the newest medicine called Ablixa, which she has already tried on one of her patients. She added that Emily had a miscarriage, and Dr. Banks says Emily hasn't mentioned it to him. Meanwhile, Emily and Martin are dressing up to attend a party. Martin tells Emily that she doesn't have to attend it if she's not feeling it, but she insists on giving it a try. At the event, the couple meets with Carl and his partner Kayla. Emily goes to the bar to grab a drink. Emily looks at herself in a distorted mirror and later can be seen crying. Kayla comes in and tells her she also went into depression herself and has taken medication. Emily runs to the balcony sobbing and they later leave the party. Emily is at a subway looking at a poster of Ablixa. She then glances at a cop, and when he turns around, Emily walks to the platform to jump as the train approaches. The officer luckily stops her. At the hospital, Dr. Banks gives his wife Deirdre a medicine for anxiety so she will feel less nervous on her coming job interview. Emily interrupts them and she tells Dr. Banks that she attempted to end her life again at the subway and asks for 5 minutes of Dr. Banks' time. At the hotel, she tells him that she can no longer take her current medication. Her coworker named Julia recommended a new medicine called Ablixa and she wants to try it. So, Dr. Banks prescribes her the Ablixa, and she goes to the pharmacy to buy it. One day, the doctors are having lunch with a med representative who is promoting an anti-anxiety medicine called Delatrex. She asks the doctors to start a trial of it with their patients, but they refuse except for Dr. Banks. Emily seems to be happy again as she and her husband go on a date. They are also having a better life than before, and Martin is happy that she took the pills. However, one night, Emily gets up, turns on the light, puts music on a very loud volume and prepares breakfast. Martin wakes up and asks her to turn down the music because it is still the middle of the night. Emily can't seem to hear him as she is just sleepwalking. They go to Dr. Banks and Martin asks if she can stop the medicine, but Emily refuses to, saying she is already getting better sleep, having more energy and better sex. Dr. Banks suggests other alternative medicines, but Emily still refuses them, so Dr. Banks just prescribes additional medicine to help with the sleepwalking. One day, Martin is dressing up to visit Marshall in prison, saying the hedge fund manager has plans to set up shop in Houston. Meanwhile, one patient of Dr. Banks agrees to start the medicine trial of Delatrex because her medication would be free. As Emily is on her way to work, she notices a toy boat displayed in a store. She arrives very late at work and tells her boss that she got on the train but forgot to get off. Her boss tells her to just go home for now and asks her not to do it again. Emily goes home and takes an Ablixa pill. Dr. Banks arrives home and sees that his wife is sad. She failed the job interview, so Dr. Banks tries to console her. One night, Martin arrives home. He notices a toy boat and gift sitting in the chair. He hears Emily preparing dinner for 3 people and he thinks that she might be sleepwalking again, so he hurries to the kitchen where he sees her cutting food. When he asks her if she is sleepwalking again, she just suddenly stabs him multiple times until he lies lifeless. Emily leaves him and she goes back to bed. The next day, NYPD detective questions Emily, who is crying. She says that she was just asleep and when she woke up, she saw him lifeless. Dr. Banks goes to the police station, and they tell him that Emily just kept talking about him. Dr. Banks says they were supposed to have an appointment last night, but Emily did not show up. When asked about why the dinner table was set for 3 people, he is puzzled. They also showed him the pills that she was taking. Dr. Banks then tells them about the sleepwalking side effect of the medicine. The assistant district attorney tells him that it can either be that she is a murderer or a victim of medical maltreatment, which can cause Dr. Banks a civil suit. Dr. Banks consults with Dr. Victoria and she tells him Emily can't be charged with murder because she has no memory and criminal intent. He then consults with a lawyer, and she tells him about cases that were acquitted because the suspect has no memory of the incident. Dr. Banks is in a dilemma and can't sleep because his career might be in jeopardy. Martin's mother visits Emily crying. Emily hands her a letter which Martin's mother read on a TV broadcast. The show invited the makers of Ablixa, but they declined. One psychiatrist, Dr. Peter, who specializes in antidepressant medicines like Ablixa, discusses the compulsory inclusion of boxed warning on these medicines. Media starts to flock at Dr. Banks' house and harass him. Dr. Banks' patients are also starting to worry that they might end up just like Emily. The office is starting the medical conduct review of Dr. Banks. The investigator asks him about his multiple shift and heavy workload. He answers that his wife lost her job and the bills had to be paid. Dr. Banks later assures Deirdre everything will be all right. At the court, multiple witnesses talk, like the parking attendant and the police officer who helped her in the subway. Dr. Banks also testifies about the sleepwalking tendency of Emily and that she was unconscious, therefore she has no intent. The court comes to agreement that Emily will be put to a mental institution until cleared by psychiatrist. One of Dr. Banks' partners brings up the case of Allison Finn, a patient of Dr. Banks during his residency. She ended her life and put Dr. Banks' name on the letter she left. The letter says that something intimate happened between her and Dr. Banks, but Dr. Banks denies it and says it is just one of her fantasies. Dr. Banks wants to clear his name, so he searches for information about the Ablixa on the internet. He finds an article written by Dr. Victoria about the sleepwalking side effect of Ablixa. Dr. Banks goes to Dr. Victoria and confronts her for not telling him about its side effect when she recommended the medicine. He then asks her how was she able to know that Emily had multiple episodes of sleepwalking. Dr. Victoria becomes speechless for a moment but then answers that it was on the news. Dr. Banks then interviewed the parking attendant, and he says that Emily was wearing a seatbelt when she rammed the car. He also goes to Emily's workplace and asks if there is someone named Julia, the one who recommended Emily the Ablixa. He finds out that there is no one named Julia working there. Dr. Banks becomes so obsessed with revealing Emily that he forgets to pick up their son at school. He then tells his wife about Julia, who Emily made up, and she tells him that Emily is sick, so it is normal for her to make things up. Dr. Banks proceeds to interview Emily at the mental institution and she says she is feeling better. When he asks her about Julia, she says that she worked with Julia at the bar, and she hasn't heard anything from her since the incident. Dr. Banks is confused and speechless. One night, Dr. Banks is talking with the med representative of Delatrex, and she tells him that because of the incident with Emily, Dr. Banks needs to step off the study and they can no longer pay him. The med representative tells him about the rival company that went up in the stock market because of what happened with Ablixa, and Dr. Banks grows more suspicious. He tells his wife about what he thinks is an insider trading conspiracy. That Ablixa and the death of Martin was used so the rival company would go up in stock market. His wife tells him to quit the case and move on. Dr. Banks goes back to Emily, and he gives her what he claims to be a truth serum. He says that if she takes it and tells the truth to the camera, she can get out of the mental institution faster. Emily looks a bit groggy from the serum and she starts to talk about her miscarried child named Madeline. When he asks her if she killed her husband for money, she says she loved him and she falls asleep. Dr. Banks shows the video to the district attorney and tells him that Emily is lying. She acted groggy and fell asleep when in fact he did not give her any drug. What he injected into her is just plain salt water. Dr. Banks says that Emily is just putting on a show and has been lying all this time. He tells the DA more about his findings but the DA tells him to stop, and it is too late since there was already a verdict. When Dr. Banks visits the mental institution, he sees Dr. Victoria's name on the list of visitors, so he confronts her. Dr. Victoria then sends pictures of Dr. Banks and Emily to his address. The photos imply that Dr. Banks is having an affair with Emily. When Dr. Banks arrives home, her wife slaps him and shows him the pictures and leaves. Later that night, Dr. Banks receives a voicemail from Dr. Victoria asking him if he received her message, implying the photos, and asks him to meet with her. When they meet, Dr. Banks threatens her back and tells Dr. Victoria she should already spend the money she got from their scheme because Emily has already told him everything. Dr. Victoria is so angry, and she tells him to get Emily out of the mental hospital and she promises they will never bother him again. At the mental hospital, Dr. Banks tells the nurse to restrict Emily's visitors and prohibit her from phone calls. He then later shows Emily a patient on a shock treatment and tells her that Dr. Victoria made a deal with him and wants Emily to go to the same treatment. Emily tries to call Dr. Victoria, but Dr. Banks already managed to restrict Emily from using the phone. She becomes violent and the nurses sedate her. Emily later sees Dr. Victoria arriving at the mental hospital. Dr. Banks meets her outside and tells her that Emily will go to the judge that week and might reveal the conspiracy they committed. She asks him again to release Emily. They shake hands and Emily sees this crying, thinking that Dr. Victoria has sold her out. Emily finally reveals to Dr. Banks the conspiracy she had with Dr. Victoria. She said she enjoyed the wealthy life she had before. When her husband was arrested, she hated him for causing her to lose everything. So, she goes to Dr. Victoria for counseling. She had been abandoned by her husband too, and the two of them began an intimate relationship. Emily teaches Dr. Victoria financial deals and derivatives that her husband taught her. On the other hand, Dr. Victoria teaches Emily about faking psychiatric disorders. They made everyone believe she loved her husband very much and she became very depressed. They faked the side effects of Ablixa to manipulate the stock prices of the medicines manufactured and its competitor, making the two of them rich in the process. She then makes a deal with Dr. Banks to release her and she will work with him in return. Dr. Banks asks the judge to release Emily while Dr. Victoria is present. Emily then visits her office while she is talking with a patient. Dr. Victoria tells her patient to leave for now because she is having an emergency. Emily asks Dr. Victoria where she hid the money, and she answers that she put it in 2 accounts in Dubai and in Grand Cayman. Dr. Victoria further admits to the crimes they have committed until she finds out that Emily is wired. As she opens the door, she sees the police officers waiting for her and arrest her. We then see Emily goes to Dr. Banks' office and Dr. Bank gives her prescription of medicines saying she has uncontrollable anger. This makes Emily mad, and she angrily storms outside where the DA, her lawyer and Martin's mother is waiting. Martin's mother slaps her before she runs outside. The police officers catch and arrest her. The movie ends with Dr. Banks fetching his son from school. They then ride the car where his wife is waiting. Meanwhile, Emily is in the mental hospital staring blankly out the window. Did you like our movie recap? Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. To be updated for new movie recaps, hit the notification bell.